I've been busy kind of recently, but I still managed to find some time in the past couple of days to hardcore try out Yuki in Chaos, and I think I have a pretty decent idea on what's good on her and what's not. So let's get into it. So first of all, I'm going to talk about her Epiphanies and her potential. So her main potential gives her the inspiration on both her longsword slash basic cards. So the longsword slash on the 1 cost is actually really good. It's basically a 0 cost free damage card that procs inspiration, so it procs your Freezing Blade, which is one of your main sources of damage, alongside of Iceberg Cleave. These are your 2 main big sources of damage. Rapid Slash is nowhere near as good. It doesn't even reduce the cost, all it does is increase the damage by 30% on a 2 cost card. This is extremely trash, so like 99% of the time you want to delete this card, and alongside Flowing Parry, this card is also no good. So these two are like Flowing Parry 100% of the time you want to delete this. Rapid Slash, there might be some niche case you want to keep it for some extra inspiration procs if you pair her with like some AP increaser like Mika, like you have tons of AP to spare and you can afford to keep this in your deck. Otherwise, I'll remove this card. Now for Yuki's first unique card, Prepare to Subdue, I'd recommend only picking the last 3 options if you can, because all these 3 cards allow you to draw 2 cards. The other 2 only let you draw 1. So already the 3 at the 3, 4, 5 are way better. So out of 3, 4, and 5, I'd say the best is probably number 4, because not only does it increase the damage of the 2 cards you draw, or it might be 1 actually, I'm not sure. I think it's only the first card, but okay, not only does it increase the damage, which is extremely good for multi-hit attacks like Iceberg Cleave, it also has an inspiration in itself, which again, as I said, will proc your Freezing Blade, which is more damage, even more damage. So the second best option I'd say is number 5, because it does not reduce the damage for like number 3, so you'll lose damage on multi-hits, or you'll notice some more multi-hits because it'll be 2 times the decrease basically. However, it is delayed by 1 turn, so that is the only downside, but more damage overall should be better in my opinion. And number 3, not saying it's bad by any means, it's just I just believe it's just not as good as number 4 and number 5, because it does decrease your damage even though you do get 2 draws during that turn you use the card. Yuki's next unique card, Flash Slash, a very good card, especially the first 3 Epiphanies, because they all have an inspiration effect. Again, you want to be using it with Freezing Blade to gain even more damage, so if the card has inspiration, it automatically makes it a better Epiphany than the other 2, because these 2 do not say Epiphany. So the best one out of these I'd say is the second one, simply because it becomes 0 cost, which is, and as you know, like AP management is like king basically, and also card management, but 0 cost cards are extremely good, and that's all I need to say. So the second best one is, I'd say 1 and 3 are pretty much equal, but I think I prefer 1 a little bit more because it does cost 1, and if you have the inspiration obviously, and number 3 does cost 2 no matter what, unless you have like some AP reduction Epiphany. So, but 3 does synergize with flat damage increases a lot, because it is inspiration plus 1 hit, so any flat damage increases to your cards will be multiplied by 2. But overall, I like having the lower cost cards, so 0 cost I think is the best, and 1 cost, then the multi-hit. Other 2 I wouldn't consider because they don't have the inspiration tag. So for Yuki's next unique card, Trickery Strike, I'm going to go against what I just said. Epiphany number 5 does have the inspiration tag. However, I find Trickery Strike much better used for the first 2 uses, because I much rather it be used as an inspiration unbricker, which I'll explain quickly what that means. So basically, sometimes when you draw inspiration cards, like hard draw them at the start of the turn, and you have no way to shuffle it back into the deck to get the effect, this is where Trickery Strike number 1 and 2, Epiphany number 1 and 2 are very good, because since they both have the retain tag, it means you can keep the Trickery Strike in your hand until you draw a bricked inspiration card, and then you can use it on demand any turn and unbrick that inspiration card. So that's why I think number 1 and 2 are the best Trickery Strike Epiphanies. So I think number 2 is slightly better because it has the retrieve tag as well, which means you can unbrick 2 cards potentially, or you can unbrick 1 card, then retrieve the Trickery Strike back, and then next turn if you draw another bricked inspiration card, you can unbrick that inspiration card as well. So the difference between the first one and second one is the first one is if you do have more than 1 bricked inspiration card in your hand, you can specifically choose which one at the cost of just 1 cost. However, for the second Epiphany, in that case, you would have to use it twice. If you lose the 50-50 on the first usage and you hit the inspiration on the one that you don't want, you have to use it again with the retrieve effect to unbrick the other inspiration card, basically. When you have 3 or more bricked inspiration cards in hand, number 1 becomes better, but that is extremely rare. So I'd say Epiphany number 2 is the best, then Epiphany number 1. And Epiphany number 4 is also usable because you automatically draw a card that has inspiration, so you automatically activate that. So it avoids the times where you draw like an attack card that doesn't have inspiration, basically. So even though most of your attack cards should have inspiration, like 70-80% of your cards should have inspiration. So yeah. So number 2 is the best and number 1 is the best, pretty close, but number 2 is slightly better. And then there's a decent gap, number 4, and then the other ones aren't as good. Yeah. And for her last Epiphany unique card, Freezing Blade, since all of Yuki's cards are basically AoE already at this point, having some more single target damage is very, very nice. So number 3 would be very, very good with its 130% on a single target. If you want more AoE, or if you don't get this option, number 1 is also still very good, 90% damage to all enemies, even though she already has tons of AoE. 90% is only 40% less than number 3. So I'd say number 3, then number 1. And number 2 is also very good because it becomes 0 cost and initiation, so you get it in your hand right at the start of the battle. And it just has the base effect of 60% to all enemies. But the fact that it's 0 cost and you automatically get it at the start is also very, very strong. So my recommendation is 3, 1, or 2. And I say they're like very, very close in power, but I'd say number 3 is better because it just gives you that extra single target damage against bosses, that extra oomph. Number 4 and 5 are not very, very good, so I try and avoid those ones if possible. You just want the amount of damage every single time you proc an inspiration, basically. That's how I like playing her deck, and that's how I think she should be played. And her final unique card, which doesn't have an Epiphany, but I just want to talk about it. Iceberg Cleave, a very, very strong card. Very, very high base damage for a 1 cost card already, and on inspiration it becomes a double hit. So this card is why you want to have as many flat damage increases as possible, so you can keep doubling those bonuses and make Iceberg Cleave like extremely, extremely strong. And because of the fact that you want as much flat damage increase as possible, I think sometimes in some of these cards you can get Morale Epiphany, where it says for 1 turn gain 3 morale, which is basically 60% flat damage, which becomes 120% bonus damage on your Iceberg Cleave because of the extra hit. So I think it's possible to get the for 1 turn gain +3 morale on your Flash Slash Epiphany. So in that case it would look like this, but with a +3 morale extra line. I think that is like an extremely, extremely strong Epiphany, and on any of these cards, whenever you can get a +3 morale for 1 turn Epiphany, you should take it, because it just increases Yuki's damage by so much, so much. And speaking of morale and flat damage increases, for items, you basically just want to stack as many items that give you as much flat damage as possible, such as Dopamine Injector, gives you up to 40% flat damage on all your attacks. And items like Wings of Freedom gives you up to 30% damage and plus 30% flat damage on the emblem. And stuff like Replica Core gives plus 50% flat damage. So keep in mind, again, as a reminder, for extra hit inspirations, this damage bonus is basically doubled for the card. So that's why like flat damage increases such as this and this are so strong. I think there's a multiplicative, but multiplicative damage is still also very strong. So yeah, just look for as many flat damage increases as possible on items such as these ones. Now, in terms of partners, her best in slot is definitely her own 5-star partner, West Makot. Not only does it give her a flat increase of 25% on drawing when she draws through an ability, which is what we want, more flat damage, and it also gives her a multiplicative 10% multiplier on all her inspiration cards, extremely strong. Not only that, she has a pretty cheap 3-cost ego skill, which basically lets you recycle a so-called bricked inspiration card you hard drew at the start of the turn, put it back into your deck, and then you get to have a chance to draw one of your inspiration cards again. So this doesn't guarantee an inspiration draw, but most of your deck should be inspiration anyway, so you have a very, very high chance of recycling your bricked inspiration card and drawing back an inspiration card to use. Her next best partner, and I think her only other option, is Lillian. So not only does it give her a 10% flat damage increase to all her attack cards that cost 1 or less, which is basically like 95% of all her attack cards cost 1 or less. So not only does it give her a flat 10%, which is not as much as West Makot, but it's a 4-star, so what can you do? Also gives her a flat up to 30% attack card damage whenever she uses a skill. She doesn't have that many skills, so you're not going to get like 30% flat every single time. So you're probably going to be like more like 10 or 20% flat extra, so you're going to be like 30% in total, which is still a pretty decent amount. No multiplicative damage increase like West Makot, but again, it's a 4-star, so it is what it is. And her ego skill is actually quite good because it does 100% AoE damage and West Makot doesn't do any damage. But you also get to draw 1 attack card. So West Makot was recycle 1 and then draw any of her own cards, but Lillian is actually an attack card, so it has a higher chance of drawing you an inspiration card because of that, because most of her skills don't have an inspiration tag on it, while her attack cards do. So yeah, I think this draw part is actually better, but the recycle obviously it doesn't have the recycle part of West Makot, but it does have 100% AoE damage to compensate, and they do both cost 3, which is actually a pretty budget amount. It doesn't cost 2, but 3 is the next best thing. As for Yuki's memory fragments, this is definitely an option. The Conqueror's aspect, 35% crit damage for 1-cost cards, but it is definitely not the best option. So the 2-set attack set is mandatory, obviously. Pretty obvious to have that one. But the 4-set, the best one to have is actually this one, the Bullet of Order Anomaly. It actually got buffed recently. Before, when an attacker was used, it increases the damage of order cards by 5% up to 3 times. So you have to use it 3 times to get the maximum effect for 15%. Multiplicative, by the way. So this is one of the only multiplicative sources of damage you can get for order, and Yuki is order, obviously. So, but now it got buffed, so it's 10% for up to 2 times, so a lot easier to stack, and the maximum damage increase is also higher, from 15 to 20%. So you definitely want this set plus the attack set together for 4-2 set. This is definitely her best set by far. And for the substats, for number 4, you want crit chance at this stage for me, because like I'm still lacking in crit chance. So I think that's for everyone in this case. So I think recommend crit chance. But if you somehow do have like near max crit chance, you should go crit damage here, obviously. And for the slot 5, you should go either attack percent or order damage, obviously, if I can find one like this, except obviously you want either on this set or this set with order damage or attack percent. I just craft attack percent slot 5 because it's more general. It can be used on any attack scaling DPS, but if you want to be like a Yuki specific craft, then you just want to craft order damage on the Bullet of Order set or order damage on Black Wing Longing set. But it makes more sense to craft if you're crafting specifically for order damage, because this is the order set. So order set on order damage makes more sense, right? And can be used on any order DPS. So that's what I would do. But I like going more general, so usually I just craft attack percent on attack set. And for number 6, obviously attack percent. So yeah, crit, order damage or attack, and attack.